Thank you for joining us on the 21st episode of the Welcome Home podcast, where we talk about the transformation from troops and boots to veterans in the civilian world. I'm Andy Weins. He's Dylan Sessler. Normally, we do about a 1 minute pre show. What are we going to talk about today? And today, I'm like, you know what? Let's hit the record button. So, Dylan, what was on your mind? That's it. What's on your mind? Talk to me, and then we'll figure it out when we get there.
I have two thoughts
Let's go.
that I've been kind of toying around this past week. One is the transition from like the hard formality of being in the military to this complete lack of structure that is the civilian life, where you have to build everything that you want in terms of structure. Or the other idea is to focus it more on employers, and tell them why they should hire veterans and what is the benefit, what's the differences that you get from hiring a veteran versus hiring someone from the civilian world, and where you can kind of build a culture around veterans themselves. I kind of want to make it a positive. I feel like we have these conversations a lot, and it feels almost negative in terms of how we have conversations around veterans. And I think telling veterans that they're valuable and showing employers that they're valuable is also a good way to good thing to discuss. So
Okay.
those are my ideas.
The fact that like your first idea was like 7 seconds and your second idea was like a minute, it shows how much more depth there is. And where we can do this twofold, because this is what it comes down to is we can talk about employers. Ultimately, the listenership of us is a lot of veterans, and the onus is on them. So actually, what I did this weekend, my girlfriend Carolyn, we made a man, what you call it now? Statement for a cause, but basically a financial justification. I'm trying to remember what she used the exact term, but basically a financial justification for her boss hiring somebody else in her department, and ultimately that's what you're talking about. We can do both topics in the sense that it put the onus on the veteran. That's what I want to focus on, because it's not why should employers hire veterans. It's what do veterans and employers need to know about each other to have a successful career.
Sure.
That is more interesting,
Yeah.
because the reasons why why employers want to hire veterans and how it plays out in real life isn't always great.
Mm-hmm.
And then to your point, and we'll talk about this, we are used to structure and discipline in the military. And I talk about this in my book, and in life. It's the more structure and discipline you have, the more freedom you have. And that's also true with military. It's like when you have structure and discipline, and then all of a sudden you get time off, you're like, oh man, you feel like you can accomplish the world, because it's like, this is my time. I accomplished all the things I had to do today, and I'm good, right? Even if it's like, I made height and weight, now I can eat all the fatty cakes, right? And like, because you made mission, right? If the mission was pass height and weight in your PT test, and you did that, it's like fatty cakes for days. Or when you're in the field for a couple of weeks, and it's like, hey, you got a 96-hour, leave or pass, and you're like, dude, you're gone, and you're gonna go do the thing, right? Because you have that freedom. The challenge is in the civilian world, when you have no discipline and you always have freedom, that does not create, or no structure. It doesn't create freedom.
Right.
It's like this thing wearing over you, like, oh, what do I need to be doing, or that haunted word, what should I be doing? And so that onus is on. It's ultimately on the returning service members. So let's talk about this. I'm an employer. I employ people, and I've also been an employee that worked jobs before I joined the military, after I joined the military, and after I deployed within the military. And it's been a very different experience all three times because of what I saw.
Yep.
When before I deployed, it was like, oh, I had a job. I worked at a gas station. I worked at a pizza place. I worked at a gas station for like 3.5 years, pizza place for like 2.5 years. I worked for a farmer in the summer, and I showed up and I did the thing, and like that was my level of structure and discipline. And I was like, I didn't know any better. And then I worked for UPS and Best Buy, and it was like, oh, I'm going to play by their rules. And then I joined the military, and then I realized I worked for Black & Decker and DeWalt Tools between basic training and when I deployed, which is about a year and some change, just over a year. between those two time periods of my life. And what I realized then was this discipline I had within the military, the structure, the consistency, that was a really good thing I brought to Black and Decker. And I was still open and didn't really understand how all of life worked. And then when I came home from Iraq, um, I had this idea that nothing in the civilian world mattered because no one was going to die today. Well, that wasn't great.
Somewhat relatable, but also probably not the right way to think about the world, right?
Yeah. And then I had something that happened where I was hired almost strictly because I was military. This guy interviewed me. His name is Paul Bittner, and I work for Waste Management, now known as WM. They went the UPS route instead of United Parcel Service. It's just UPS. Waste Management is now only WM. Anyways, he hired me because he's like, "Hey, I want to hire somebody that's in the military to lead this team." And I was the production manager or facility manager um, for a medical waste treatment facility. Making $42,000 a year, which I thought was like astronomical money. And I ran a team of anywhere between 10 and 13 guys, 12 guys on a given day, unloading semis and processing medical waste. And it was as sexy as you can think it was. And the challenge I had there was he wanted me to basically go in there and be a drill sergeant, yell and scream and, whip these guys into shape kind of thing. And he had no concept of what the military was outside of TVs and movie. So he just thought, hey, you're going to just come in here and do that. And at the time, I was an E5 in the reserves. Like, I didn't know shit about nothing. I knew I had like 2 soldiers assigned me on the weekend, and I had to make sure that they could pass a PT test. Like, that was this is my leadership, right? And I went to 2 weeks of WLC and 2 weeks of BNOC. And basically, I knew how to do land nav and hit Control F on Adobe PDF. And if you're really getting bougie, Control Shift F and search multiple documents. No big deal. Put that one in your bank for later.
You're
no one
welcome.
ever has to. Yeah, you're welcome. This is even before Google. Now I can tell you this because I'm still in the reserves. I took a test the other day, DTS familiarization,
Oof.
2 minutes and 45 seconds. I was clipping because every answer was on Quizlet. Let me tell you something. 19 out of 20. Well, you fucking teasing? 3-hour class, 2 minutes and 45 seconds, 19 out of 20, minimum 70 pass, or I think it's minimum 80. I think minimum 80s now. That doesn't matter. 19 out of 20. Get her done. Sent it in. You're welcome, America. Thank you for your freedom. Or thank you for your service. You're welcome for your freedom. Again, I don't remember the topic. Here's the deal. Employers out there struggle to understand what you bring as a veteran. Veterans struggle immensely at explaining transferable skills.
That's fair.
That's the struggle point, because in an interview process, that's ultimately right. The best employers out there hire people that have the desire and ability to learn, not the skill sets. There's some people that are like, I need an accountant. I'm going to hire the first person that meets the qualifications of 4-year degree, CPA, 5 years experience. I'm going to hire the first person that says all those things and shows up on time for their interview. Most other employers like me, I do junk removal. I'm actively looking for an operations person. Right now, I'm not expecting anybody with any operations background. I need somebody that wants to learn the job and knows which way is north. Which, for the record, I'm sitting north. And I know I'm sitting north because the lake is that way. Because in Wisconsin, you put your arm to the lake, the right arm, and then you're facing north. That's as simple as I can explain how that works. And if you can do that, you can route trucks. Like that's right. Like, so
That's
I
it.
would, right. If you hire, like right now, I'm looking for someone that said, hey, I'm detail oriented. I like talking to people. And I'm motivated to close deals, for example, right? Like, those are 3 things I'm looking for that are intangible skills. I can teach you how to press the buttons, and spell check is a great tool if you're not also good at spelling, right? And I don't need you to have a degree. You don't need to have a degree to run my operation software. Like, 1 day of training will teach you it, and a 4-year degree will not teach you how to run our software. Taking a drink.
Yep.
So because of that, veterans, your resume and cover letter, whatever. Figure out the algorithms. Once you get in front of an employer, it's important that you have a genuinely honest conversation. And unlike the military, this is also your opportunity to interview your potential employer. Because in the military, often it's very, your career progression is laid out for you, right? You make team leader, you make squad leader, maybe you pick up an additional duty or two. Maybe you go to airborne or air assault school, or like in your case, sniper selection, right? You do those little adjunct things, and then you make squad leader, then you make platoon sergeant, and then maybe if you have a college degree, you're going to college at some point around that E6 time period, you have an opportunity to go, warrant officer. If you have the right, if you're MOS and you're a technical expert, you go officer if you have the degree, or you continue on the path of non-commissioned officer, and then you basically go into operations at that E7 level, or as a platoon sergeant if you're not already there. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you can either go like company, battalion, brigade ops, or something there, training ops, whatever it is, or you stay, first sergeant major. The civilian world is not like that.
Right.
It's not laid out that way. Most small companies, your title means dick, because they don't have 50 people with 50 unique jobs. They have 7 people that do 50 people's worth of work.
Yep.
and your operations person, right? Let's say an operations manager is also customer service, is also, the air conditioner's not working, and you're now the facilities director, because you're the person who has to call the air conditioning people because you have the one office that has air conditioning. Yeah. And so the Army has 1 million strong, where everybody has individual jobs. Actually, you didn't even bring this up. There's a mobilization that just kicked off. No big deal. Calling up 400 IRR soldiers, mm-hmm. for 3,000 total troops.
Yep.
And one of the things I read about it a little bit, and they're calling in certain MOSs like rail. Rail in the Army is only in the reserves. There's no need for it in the active duty. So rail is only in the reserves. There's a couple of other specialties that are reserve only, or National Guard only, maybe. I don't know. I for sure know reserve only. And so like in the Army, every position, every job is covered. In the civilian world, small companies, they don't have 1 million people to select from to send to a training in an unlimited budget, i.e. the DOD, which is 40% of our taxes go to it, or whatever astronomical number it is. And small companies, your adaptability and attitude are going to take you a hell of a lot farther than your technical skills and proficiency. Where in the military, you can have a shit attitude, but you can fucking run like a motherfucker and do some you can do some push-ups, and you can pretty much make E5. You could be a turd of a person that can memorize shit and smoke a PT test, and you can make E5 and even E6. I've seen some real selfish dirtbag E6s because they can run, shoot, and memorize.
Yeah.
Active duty calls them board babies.
Yeah.
We don't really have boards in the reserves. They're just the charmers. They can turn it on for 2 days, and once you get in the barracks, they're the biggest fucking turds. Yeah. They're the ones that sleep in, go to bed first, don't give a fuck about anybody else, jump in line for chow first. All those things are unbecoming of a soldier, of a servant leader. They're all those things. They can still make E5 or E6. And even farther, I'm not, whatever. There's turds everywhere at every rank.
I think the biggest thing that I see is, in terms of the context of this conversation, is like the difference between having a leadership position and leading, especially in terms of like the military versus civilian world. Like there's, when you're talking about like picking up an operations guy, a military candidate is typically going to have more experience having to have the initiative to actually lead, rather than just filling the position and basically being the next level follower, right? Which is what I think the civilian world kind of implements, is like, okay, you get to this level and you're in a leadership position, but like nobody really cares if you actually do more than what's expected of you. We just need you to do the bare minimum. Where I think the military kind of emphasizes the fact that if you do more, you're rewarded more with NCOERs and OERs, and trying to get people to, you get awards and medals and all that stuff. And I think there's this really interesting kind of culture that comes from from leadership itself, right? Like leadership became such a huge topic in, early 2000s. And then, everybody wrote a book about it. Um, but the military's always kind of had that necessity of
Yeah.
understanding leadership. And we always have these conversations of like the Army doesn't know how to teach leadership because it's it's already there. It's the
Yeah.
culture develops the leadership, and if you don't learn it, well, you don't know how to talk about it, and you're not going to be a part of it.
And, and leadership is not something that we can taught cookie cutter like everything else in the military.
Right.
Like BRM, right? Like basics, breathing, sight picture, trigger squeeze. Those are tactical things that can be taught. Leadership, there's a fucking 100 books out there, and if you want 100 people and you gave them all 100 books, they'll all right. They're not going to unanimously like this is the one. No, they're
Yep.
going to find parts and pieces of all of them, or they're going to find the one they're like, yep, I'm running this play in this play alone.
Yep.
And you're right. It is the idea for me whenever I think of leadership in the military. The best leaders I had are the ones that taught me how to do their job.
Yeah.
And that was it. Like my squad leader in Iraq, for example, we didn't have a team leader, and it was weird. Our team leader got moved to another unit, and then we got this shit bag, whatever. Basically, I was rogue in Iraq, and I didn't have a team leader. So so I basically reported the squad leader when it came down to it, and he taught me what it was like to be a squad leader. And then when I got back to the reserves, I knew how to be a team leader. I knew how to be a squad leader, so it was very natural for me to do that. And then I remember what happened was I became a platoon sergeant. And one of my squad leaders was like, "You've never had a great relationship between a squad leader and a platoon sergeant." I'm like, "No, I learned from my squad leader. I never learned how to be a platoon sergeant. I just happened to be the guy I was the E6 among the non E6s. Like that's how I got the job as the platoon sergeant." And so it's like, oh, now all of a sudden you're the platoon sergeant. I'm like, oh shit, I never knew how to do that job, and I
Yeah.
wasn't very good at it because I didn't know how to do it because no one taught it to me firsthand. If I'd have had a couple of years as a squad leader and developed a relationship with a good platoon sergeant, then we would have been good. But I went from team leader to squad leader to now I'm a platoon sergeant. And so that is the part of the military that works best. And I've also seen it the other ways where you have some team leaders or squad leaders where their squad leaders or platoon sergeant don't teach and train and coach and mentor them because
Mm-hmm.
they have this idea that I'm always going to have this job and I don't want someone else to take it. And those are the ones that resent that platoon sergeant
Yep.
because that platoon sergeant is stuck in their ways because they've realized they're not going to make first sergeant. And so now they're just going to ride out their turd time as an E6 or E7 and collect their 20, 24 years and then bounce out.
Yep.
And all the NCOs, in their ranks have now missed out because of that person.
Right.
And I go to the platoon sergeant because that's when you have, from what I've seen, the most stagnant role in the Army is, from again my perspective, is a E7 platoon sergeant.
Yep.
Because once you make E8, a lot of guys don't get out. So it's like those positions are coveted, and a lot of platoon sergeants don't want to go into the operations route, training operations, right? Some other opportunity there. And so they get stuck. And then that means that every squad leader, or even section leader, depending on how your unit is set up, is stuck and they're stagnant. And now they're E6s, E7s, and they might go, the operations route. We had 3 E7 squad leaders when I was in Iraq because all of a sudden we had all these E6s that got promoted. We were all heavy. It's like, well, these guys aren't all going to go be, first sergeants. So now you have all these E7s there that there's not even a spot for them to be platoon sergeants. So they're all squad leaders. So it's like they're not fucking going anywhere anytime soon. And there were guys that were sticking around for 20 years and made E6.
Yep.
So I've seen it both ways. I've seen it when it's done right with my squad leader in Iraq, for example, and I've seen it when it's done wrong where guys stick around. And in the civilian world, I've never seen it where a boss, by their own merit, taught me especially how to do his job or her job.
Yeah.
Whether I was like when I was doing sales for Black and Decker, I had a really good boss at first, Luke Riffle, and I never really appreciated him for how good he was to me because I was 20. I couldn't see what he saw, and he taught me really well how to do my job. He never trained me up to do his job, and I wasn't there long enough, so it wasn't like I was there 5 years and chomping at the bit. I was there for about a year with him. And then even when I worked in waste management, man, they're like, "Oh, here's your job. Like you're in the military, figure it out." Like that was the extent of the training I got. And then when the plant that I worked at shut down and I got transferred to being a route manager, um, I was there like 6 months and I was the senior route manager. There was 4 route managers and I was the senior. And the one guy that was like quasi near us, who'd been there for like 10 years, but then he got moved over to a different division. He's like, well, I figured it out and so will you. And like walked away. I'm like, dude, I've been here 6 months. Like I was the senior guy because I had to log into all the systems. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And again, this is where I've also seen people struggle and fail when they come to the civilian world, when they see how fucked up it is. They think the military was fucked up because the military does a lot of stupid shit. And they get to the civilian world and they're like, it's one thing when you have a system that fails. It's a whole other thing when there's not even a system
Yeah.
or a process.
Right.
So like, how do we survive every day kind of mentality?
Yeah. If like one person in that, quote unquote system is gone,
Yeah.
like the whole thing comes crashing down.
Yeah, it's like, what do you do with this? Oh, we give it to Jenny. What does she do? Oh, I don't know. She does the thing and then we get paid.
Yeah.
Well, what do we do when Jenny's not here? Oh, we don't know.
Jenny's got all the passwords.
Exactly. Seriously. Like, oh, Jenny's sick for a week. Sorry, we can't process payroll because
right.
Like that's what Jenny does. Right? Yep. Right? Like you're right. In the Army, it's like, oh, you need a 42 Alpha? They shit 42 Alphas out every day.
Right.
Like any 42 Alpha gets in, yep, here's your UIC, and they can basically do anything.
And I think the veterans understand that because they understand the value of the system because they were a part of it. As much as everybody that's been in the military and the history of the military hates bureaucracy, they also have an appreciation for what it can do for you. And I think when you have a civilian company that doesn't understand that capacity, you have those weaknesses that could be completely debilitating if you don't address that. You need a system that says, each person has to take initiative in more than just their way.
Well, what it comes down to, and this is what the best companies have, it's no longer this job description, kind of the age of the dinosaur. It is roles and responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to a company that says, hey, here are the roles you're going to partake, you're going to do this, this, and this. That's very similar to the military, right? You're squad leader, you're the UPL guy, or like I was mass resilience trainer and I was a non-lethal weapons instructor. Here are the roles you have. And here are the responsibilities are assigned to these roles. Right? You got to take care of 2 troops. These are the expectations. You know what right? Here are the expectations you have of yourself, PT, BRM, all that shit, and also for your soldiers. And additionally, here are the roles and responsibilities for your MOS. You have to know these, and you have to teach these proficiently, and you have to be moral character and lead, blah blah. Right? And then here are the additional responsibilities, as assigned. And it's like, oh, okay, this is pretty clear and concise. Often in the military or in the civilian world, it's like there's a job description, which is mostly, are you qualified, yes or no? And then there's a couple bullets of what you're doing every day, administrative functions and but it doesn't break it down. And really good companies have roles and responsibilities, and then a leader can see within those roles and responsibilities what they need to do every day so they fulfill those roles and those responsibilities. And that's what it ultimately comes down to, right? You have tools, you have processes. At the end of the day, we need leaders that make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that the military does great. Military will take a 21-year-old and give him a $50 million tank and say, make sure you kill the right people.
Mm-hmm.
See you when you come home.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't see that in the civilian world. I mean, you could be, hell, there's 21, 22-year-old pilots there, right? They're in charge of, multi-million-dollar aircraft, and they have to make the split-second decisions whether or not people live or die.
Yep.
21, 22-year-olds. And then I've taught at UW-Madison and UW-Milwaukee and a couple other private schools here in the Milwaukee area. And I met 21, 22-year-olds that couldn't articulate a sentence because all they've ever done is text,
right,
and email. They never looked a man in the eye and shook his hand and, hey, how are you? This is my name. This is what I do.
Right.
And in the military, it's like day one, right? Yelling, right? You drill sergeant yelling and screaming. You come off the bus, and then all of a sudden you're in a barracks room with 50 other dudes, and you got to figure it the fuck out. Like that's when that's when some of the most meaningful learning occurred for me was in basic training when people weren't around. And same with Iraq. It wasn't like The missions that went well, like, yeah, it was, enough rock tables and battle drills, you're going to react accordingly. All the learning that happened in between those times, that's when real meaningful learning occurred on how to be a good human,
Right.
or not even be a good one, how to be a human,
Yeah. I mean,
how to interact with others.
that's the adhesive that brings all the, for the military, all the character traits that they say here are the values, here are the Army values. That kind of forced communication that happens in basic training and beyond is kind of that adhesive that says this is how you make these happen. It's like you have to talk to other people, you have to interact with other people, and I think that's, civilians can definitely have that, but it's not taught on a scale for just the average Joe that's out there in the workforce.
Yeah, you also could do this magical thing in the civilian world, which is called quit,
Yeah.
or go in your boss's office and bitch.
Yeah.
Could you imagine going to the drill sergeant and be like, or go to CQ and be like, "Hey, I'm not getting along with fucking Private Snuffy." Like the idea of that is comical, and yet, if you ask an 18-year-old civilian type at a job, "Hey, what would you do if you had conflict with another employee?" I would put money on it that they would say, "Oh, I would go talk to HR, or I would go talk to my boss."
Yeah.
Like, there ain't no fucking HR desk in the company area at basic training.
Yeah.
And if you got an issue with another soldier, drill sergeant ain't your solution.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's a fact, Jack. So you're like you said, but by design, to a certain extent, the drill sergeants know that's going to happen. And even me, when I was a platoon sergeant, I realized that, like, when we mobilize and stuff, there's a reason why we had NCOs, in one area of the barracks, and senior NCOs in another area, and troops in another. You got to let the fucking Joes be Joes every now and then. And yeah, they're going to talk shit about you. And yeah, they're not going to understand everything. And that's part of life.
Mm-hmm.
Because from their fighting position, they see what they see.
Right.
And Joes, man, right? They are the definition of, right? It's a lie can make it halfway around the world before the truth even gets its shoes on. I mean, if I want to know what's going on, you just go find the fucking, you go in the smoking area, or at our reserve unit, we had a spot, and basically all the soldiers would hang out around this one quarter, and I would just stand on the corner where they couldn't see me, and I would just listen to them. I'm like, oh, okay, there's the pulse. We don't need a fucking command climate survey. I know exactly what these things are happening, right? And then just so conveniently, next formation, I would address the thing at hand, and I would give the truth. And then you see a couple guys like snicker, like, yeah, motherfuckers, the walls talk. The army's way too small, And half the time it's like, hey guys, yeah, this is probably gonna suck. And if you go into it with that attitude, it's gonna suck, right? Or if you look, if you're optimistic and you look for the opportunity here, it won't suck as much. And learn to embrace the suck. Let's go.
Yep.
If it ain't raining, we ain't training. I don't know what to tell you. And so, by design, the military forces people to figure it the fuck out. And when death is on the line, it's a really good motivator to come up with collaboration. I was gonna say compromise, but for me, compromise has a negative connotation. But collaboration. Let's figure this shit out together.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a forced issue in the military where it's not in civilian world.
Yeah, or you have people that are like, oh, I just can't stand the side of her face or his face, and I don't want to go into work on Monday.
Group project.
When you're downrange, every day is fucking Monday.
Yeah.
Because every day you see the same people, and every day there's not a weekend coming up in the next 5.
Yeah.
I think about that often too. Sometimes for an entire year, like I knew what day it was and day of the month and shit like that, and right.
I didn't. My first deployment, I had no idea what day it was.
Clue.
No.
I had I couldn't tell you what day of the week it was because the day of the week was so insignificant.
Yeah.
That part. And I'm a numbers guy, so I like numbers. But like I had that happened. I could never be like, oh, that happened on a whatever day. Now, in the civilian world, if something happens, I can tell you almost with certainty what day of the week it is, because every day for me is relatively scheduled. Like Mondays I do content. I do my 2 podcasts. On Tuesdays we have our morning meeting, and once a month I have my meeting with my business coach on Tuesdays. And every other Wednesday morning I go to this same breakfast chamber thing. And on Thursday morning we have our marketing meeting at 9. And once a month I have a KPI meeting, and once a month I have a financial meeting at 10. And then Fridays I have a standing meeting at 8 a.m. and I have another standing call at 4 p.m. So it's like
Yeah.
I got a pretty good idea of when something happened, what else occurred in that frame of that day, right? And
Right.
this is just like random things that happen every week, you know? Um, and Iraq, I fucking couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
Or Gitmo, couldn't tell you. And yeah, I don't know the day it happened. I guess I knew like about the month things happened. Like the month of Ramadan, which whatever that it was, like September/October. Not great, Bob. Not great.
Yeah.
You know, like we got there in May, and we it was hot that summer, and it got real hot real quick in Ramadan. I do remember that, and I do remember being on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, fucking tower guard, looking at the damn sand, waiting for fucking Charlie to cross the wire. Never showed up.
Didn't get the memo.
No, and I only remember that because it was the last 10 days of the month. Because that month, everybody had to do 10 days of tower guard, and that's when I was tower guard. Lance Corporal Little, U.S. Marine Corps. That's who I was in a tower with. I'm thinking I'm friends. Facebook. I'm gonna check that out. I'm pretty sure I'm Facebook friends with that cat.
I just remember my first deployment just being a blur for especially the middle part, because I became an S6 for an entire fob, probably a 500-person fob. I as an infantry team, not even a team leader. I was an E5, but I wasn't in a team leader role. We had 4 E5s in my team, and I was the second most senior. And so I became basically a fob S6, and I managed the radios. I also was, I had to spin myself up on how to basically set up a network
Hmm.
for phone lines and for computers. I learned how to
You were infantry at the time, or was
yeah,
your MOS?
and
Okay,
yep, 11 Bravo.
there you go. I just want to make sure everybody here listening heard that, because that's the reality of the military.
Yeah, and so like
101.
as I was running missions, I was still running missions the same as I was before, but my secondary task was literally like rebuilding this fob because
Mm-hmm.
Afghanistan just destroys wires. And so I did that, and I rebuilt trucks and their communication systems. I put up BFTs, I put in radios. I basically rebuilt an entire truck's radio system and BFT system without knowing anything about them ever before that deployment. And that's what I was tasked to do by some major. Was like, this is what I want you. This is what I want from you. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. It's like, figure it out. Right.
Yeah.
And so I spent, I remember spending like 2 or 3 months doing that, and I don't think I ever looked at a calendar outside of like, hey, when do we have missions? Like to me, it didn't matter. I was like, I would walk in, I'd ask to talk, do I have a mission today? No, you're not on. Awesome. Go do my job. Right.
Yep.
And it's that story is repeated by so many other people in the military, that you learn how to adapt so quickly, and you take the initiative to just get what needs to be done, that it becomes second nature. And the civilians that I've worked with that have that are so few and far between, that it usually comes from some kind of like some kind of, I don't know, trauma, or like parent that was just like so overbearing that they had to like do everything for everyone all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so rare. And to compare that to the leaders that I've worked with in the military, that is so second nature to them. It's profound to see the difference in civilian leadership, and what I hear from stories and the people that I meet. That we just have a very different definition of leadership, that is, as you say, servant leadership, that is characterized by action, rather than, by just defining like, hey, you're in a leadership role. Like, no, like if you want to be a leader, you have to action that request and make something happen rather than just sit in the role of being a leader.
Well, the thing, I've thought about this often. I've said it a few times in keynote speeches and whatnot. The civilian world does not have a lot of titles. Let's go back to titles with the word leader in them. They
Yeah.
have a lot of titles that are managers.
Yeah.
They're not leading people, they're managing expectations of the organization.
Yeah.
And those are two different things. And
Correct.
the world is going the way of the leader. There's no doubt about it. The progressive companies are going the way of the leader. And the military has always done that. You can't manage a battlefield. I'll argue managing people is a failure, because when you manage them, you are now putting them into boxes. No, you want to lead them so they can be the best version of themselves for the benefit of the organization. Overall, you want all your troops doing their job to the best of their ability, because that's what's going to make the team, squad, platoon, company better. And so that's one of the challenges the civilian world has is they don't teach, coach, and mentor leadership.
Yeah.
It's an individual task. You'll see good companies, they'll bring in a keynote speaker.
Yep.
They say, hey, here's a good book to read. Let's get on the same page, like EOS. They get the entrepreneurial operating system, which is with traction, and they'll teach you the tools and how to have meetings and a little bit of leadership stuff. Academia doesn't fucking teach leadership.
No.
I have a bachelor's degree, and they don't know how.
It's not quantifiable.
Because they live in this sterile environment where they can control all the things, and every time you put in this input, there's a reasonable expectation of that output. That's not how people work.
I think it's a failure of culture driving towards statistics, if I'm being honest, right? Because leadership isn't something that you can easily quantify and say like, this is what the best leaders do, right? And you can try to do that, but then you lose sight of the fact that there are so many different kinds of leadership that are beneficial to many different kinds of people. And so like, it's not something that you can easily quantify and say, this is exactly what a leader looks like. And so like this idea that culture is driving towards, hey, like you have to have a quantifiable kind of understanding of how you benefit other people. And that's just not always applicable when you're talking about leadership, because it's sometimes you do need to pick the one person over the many to get the result that sometimes people that look at statistics can't see. So I really think that like we're chewing off our own foot by saying statistics is everything, right? That's one of the biggest things I had an issue with, and when I studied sociology was quantitative or qualitative, right? I was always a qualitative guy. I always wanted to interview people and understand people more. And then it felt like the whole field just wanted to research statistics and understand people just based off of a number. And the reality is they're both beneficial and applicable, but we're losing sight of qualitative sometimes and understanding how people actually impact without the statistics involved.
Well, yeah. There's a really good word for you: impacting an organization versus being a task manager.
Right.
When you're talking about their quantifiable and quantitative is task manager. Did you do these things?
Yep.
And not, hey, what impact did you have in the organization? Right. We begin. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Right. It's to begin with the end state in mind. The end state in mind is that our organization grows, the teams grow, people grow. And yet we measure tasks like it's the score. Yep. It's like, is the job to score 50 baskets, or is the job to be better at basketball?
Yeah.
Because I give you 50 baskets, right? It might take me 300 shots. Or I can get better at basketball, so the next time I need to shoot, I have a higher likelihood of making a bucket.
Yeah.
And when we're in doing mode and check off shit off our list mode, we're not getting much better at our craft, which is funny. I think I've talked about on this podcast, I certainly have on the other one, is do you know what are the two professions, or name a few of the professions that we hold in high regard? Have I ever done this exercise with you? Does this sound familiar?
I don't think so.
So what are some what are some professions we hold in high regard that require a degree and our society looks at very favorably?
Favorably.
Yes.
Interesting. MBAs. So,
Yep.
you know, uh, probably CPAs, public
Okay. Who else?
accountants, uh, judges,
Okay, that's one of them.
um, doctors.
There we go. So within three, you got two of the three.
Yeah.
Here's what's interesting. In order to be a judge, you got to be a what first?
Lawyer.
Okay. Do you know what lawyers and doctors do versus the rest of us? And they get away with it every time. They practice.
Yeah.
Right? It's a doctor has his practice. A lawyer, they literally call it practice.
Yep.
They're not task managers. Yes, going to court is their arena, and then they practice law.
Mm-hmm.
They practice it. I don't fucking practice junk removal. When I show up to your house, the couch has got to go. I'm not like, hey, let me see if I can get it through the doorway. Oh, it fit. Let me take it back in and do it again. Right? This idea of practicing a craft, even the military. If you didn't die, you're practicing it. There's never a time where like, oh, the job is done. Until you ETS, you're continually practicing that craft.
Yeah.
And yet almost every other job, if you're like, hey, I'm going to go to work and practice today, my craft, people look at you like you're nuts.
Yeah. You're going to go to
military,
work.
What do the military do? You're training. You're constantly getting ready to go to war.
Yeah.
Even all the admin stuff, the people that actually do stuff in the military, like quantifiable, quantitative, did the thing, in process the soldier, made sure they got paid. They're doing that so that soldier can eventually deploy and go to war and practice war. Well, that's a difference. When we allow our employees the autonomy to practice their craft, to do things on their own, or troubleshoot, or figure out, or find their leadership voice, that's when often they're going to be their best.
Yeah.
Or you're going to find the bored babies. You're going to find the people that can say and do all the right things to your face, and yet once you say, okay, go do the thing, it either does or does not occur.
Can't make it happen. Yeah. And
it doesn't happen because they don't get the end state result.
That requires integration with a leader that says, hey, here's the task. And anyone can do that, right? Like that's obviously what a task manager does, is like, here's the task, but you can get Google to fucking give out tasks, right? Like what you need to really identify whether you have an employee that's beneficial or not is, here's the task. What do you think you should do? Right? How are you going to accomplish this? And that's exactly what the military does, right? Like, give me an op order, right? And
case in point.
And the squad leader gives an op order, and then platoon sergeant looks at him and is like, hey, you forgot, number 5 completely, right? And we need to make sure we accomplish that, and we square away exactly what the plan is, what the task is. And then if that person still has issues, that's when you can identify the persistent kind of systematic issues within your own training process, or the Army's training process, or the civilian, workplace training process. Or you can identify, hey, this squad leader's having a problem, or this employee's having a problem. And they're just not in the right headspace to do any of this. And how can I support this? How can I help this? How can I solve this? Does this person need to be fired? That kind of stuff. But you need to integrate with the process to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, Jocko talks about that with extreme ownership. He would tell people what the end state of the mission was, right, based on the commander's intent.
Yeah.
And then said, come back to me with a plan. And then it's the leader's job to poke holes in the plan because they have the experience that this other person doesn't have. And so how you prevent that, we'll use like a squad leader platoon sergeant relationship. The job of the platoon sergeant isn't to go out and run missions. The job of the platoon sergeant is to ensure that the squad leader or leaders have the best information available so they can fulfill the needs of the platoon leader and ultimately the based on the commander's intent. And the job there is to say, just poke holes in the plan.
Yep.
Instead of saying, hey, here's the plan, and say, come to me with a plan. And then I'm going to poke holes in it because I have the experience to know what could go wrong that you don't know yet.
Yep.
And then you don't beat them up. You just say, okay, have you considered this? What happens if this happens? Okay. Okay. And then can you think on your feet?
Yep.
I met a few officers that would sit there and come up with an op order and come up with a fucking plan, and had zero. It was so rigid. There was zero flexibility. It's like, well, I'm glad they taught you that at fucking ROTC or whatever, right? Like shit's about to not go well for you because you have this thing rigid and by doctrine. It's like, well, that's not, even a lot of stuff when it comes to war. It's like, here's the anticipated results,
right?
And you have to have flexibility when that thing does or does not happen.
Yep.
I mean, right now, actually, what's interesting, I saw a thing earlier today, completely off topic now, about Ukraine and how basically NATO and China are watching how all the systems are working together. Like the U.S. is getting tons of data on how the Patriot missile system is working.
Yep. Because
this is the first conventional force that the Patriot missile system has gone up against.
Yep.
That had artillery batteries and drones and all this shit. It's like they're learning so much because it's like, yeah, they designed the system to do this and they wrote the doctrine, and now they're watching and then they taught the Ukrainians, and then they gave the Ukrainians the tools, and now they're like, oh shit, the Ukrainians are using them in a way that wasn't their original design, and that's good.
Yeah,
because it's either going to work better or worse.
Yep.
That's it. You can qualify or quantify that. You can't qualify or quantify right off the bat whether or not it's going to be better or worse until you run the play.
Right.
And this ain't a fucking training scenario. When the Patriot missile systems does not deploy correctly, people die.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thankfully, for us, the United States, it's not happening here.
Right.
The Ukrainians are suffering, and we're learning because they're all practicing war. They're using our tools to practice war, and we get to sit back and watch. And so the video was about what is China learning about their potential invasion of Taiwan, and basically they said that they're learning how NATO and the United States might respond politically. From a tactical perspective, it doesn't apply as much because it'll almost be a naval battle with Taiwan. However, China has I don't know what it is. Like they have an Air Force and a Navy and an Army, and they also have a rocket.
Yeah.
What do you call it? A rocket branch.
Yep.
I'll type that in. Because I don't know, they're the ones that invented rockets per se, which is true. I got to figure out what this is because that wasn't part of it. That's something else I'm randomly. There it is. People Liberation Army Rocket Force.
Yeah.
Like we have Space Force, and yet they're like, no, we have a whole section of our Department of Defense, the People's Liberation Army, of rockets. That's what we do.
Yep.
It's different. The point is, when it comes to war and implementation of systems, it's like you could have all the training in the world and you got to go out there and see if it works or not. Yep. And you're going to expend a lot of fucking rounds.
Mm-hmm.
Just like it takes a lot of free throws made in practice to make the one that matters in a game. It takes a lot of rounds down range to see how the equipment works. And practice ain't the same as a game.
Right.
Academia is practice at best. And then the real world is the game. Yeah. And there's not a lot of jobs that are in between where you're practicing and playing the game. Army is the military really is. It's like you're training and you're fighting or you're doing your job. Like there's obviously like your cooks and your mechanics and your admin, they're doing the job to keep the soldiers fed and the vehicles on the road and people paid and all that stuff. Everybody else is training. That's it. You're practicing. Like you're infantry sniper, unless you're downrange, you are practicing.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody else, while doing their job, are practicing to get better at it.
Yeah.
Civilian world, ain't nobody practicing. I don't pay people to practice junk removal.
Right.
I'll pay them to practice leadership and try new abilities. I had one of our guys. He's military. I found out I thought he was in longer. He was only in for like 18 months because his unit got disbanded. They're like, hey, do you want to go to another unit or do you want to go home? He's like, fuck it, I'm going home. So it was a reduction in force situation. Yeah, he's like, fuck this, I'm done. You mean I signed the dotted line and I don't have to fulfill it because y'all fucked up?
The
Okay.
luck of this guy.
I know this fucking guy. I got another buddy. This guy I go to Vegas with. His name is Dwight D. White, and he joined in the early '90s, right after Gulf War. Same thing. He was in the reserves. He joined. Like 2 years later, his unit disbanded, and they're like, "Do you want to drive 100 miles?" He's like, "Nah, fuck that." And he got then promoted to E4 while he was in the IRR, and then got out his E4 and was like did like 2 years and was just chilling. He's like I didn't want to leave. I also didn't want to drive like 4 hours. I was a broke college student and full education benefits, not like post 9/11 or nothing, but he still got the chapter 33 because he 100% fulfilled his obligation.
Yeah.
Anyhow, this would happen on Friday. I'm at my house. I get a call. I remember it's 1744 for your military types. And I went home early on Friday because I was going to a Green Day concert. Otherwise, I would normally be one of the last ones in the office. Anyways, he calls me. He's like, "Hey, we got a truck to unload. Do we unload it tonight or tomorrow?" Like, well, let's look at the pros and cons. Why would you unload it tonight? Or why wouldn't you? Right? Why wouldn't you just follow the SOP? And he gave me the cons of doing it. I'm like, okay, well, what about tomorrow? And he's like this. I go, okay, sounds good. Make a decision. He's like, well, what do you want me to do? I said, I want you to make a decision. He goes, well, I just want to get your perspective, or I want to hear what you think because I know you're going to ask me why eventually. I'm like, yeah, I am going to ask you why eventually. And I need you to make a decision now. Because whether we unload a truck or not on a Friday night at 5:45, me, the owner of the company, doesn't need to make that decision. That's not that right? Like, you need to make that decision. And I go, and as the owner of the company, I have the right to ask you why, because I want to hear your logic. Now, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to make the right decision or you're going to make the wrong decision because you had the wrong information or you interpreted the information wrong. The two guys on Friday night, 5:45, 80 degrees out, they're pissed off because something else happened today. Yeah, they're going to be pissed off if they have to unload the truck. If you have other guys come in early tomorrow or stay late tomorrow, they also might be pissed off. So I don't care what the decision is, make a decision. And his choice was, I'll just come in and do it myself. Well, that's stupid. You're a fucking leader in the organization.
Yeah.
Delegate. You're going to piss one person off and make one person happy. You can't just make the one guy happy and then avoid conflict.
Yeah.
And turns out, he asked, there was 4 people coming in on Saturday. He had reached out to all 4. Hey, who's willing to come in early to unload this truck? 2 guys were like, yeah, I'll take the extra hours. Right? So it's like he had to be uncomfortable, right, for a hot minute to challenge the team to come up with the best answer. The military, we are taught that.
Yep.
Like,
You're
verbatim,
expected.
like, expected that.
Yeah.
Like, fuck your feelings. From day one of basic training, it's like, I need volunteers.
Yeah.
If no one raises their hand, they're like, oh, I guess no one raised their hand, so no one's doing KP. We're not eating today.
Then you're voluntold.
I know I said this on the podcast before, and this also works in the civilian world. When you volunteer for everything, they can't make you do anything.
Yeah.
And it applies, and the same with civilian world. When you lean into everything that's uncomfortable, eventually stops being uncomfortable. Because you get the reps in, and the reps in, and the reps and the reps in. Only with reps do you start to get good at something. And then you're comfortable. And then the goal is go do something else that's uncomfortable. Keep raising the bar of discomfort. Right? It's exposure therapy. And that's all. That is the human experience. The people that are happiest, from what I've seen, are the ones that expose themselves to so many different stimuluses throughout their lives. Constantly, every day, did something difficult. There's a keynote speaker that says that I'm remiss right now with who says it. They said, hey, do something challenging every day. And it's like, fuck, that's good. Like yesterday, I changed out the door. I got a new washer, and it's a front loader. And my dryer opens one way and the washer opens the other way. It made no sense. Why wouldn't you just fucking manufacture them all to open right hinge? Come on, what the fuck over? So I get one of each, and I have a wall on the other side. So like yesterday, before I went to the beach, because I was like, you know what? I'm gonna change out this door. And it wasn't incredibly difficult. I watched a 6-minute YouTube video. I fucked it up a few times because I took it apart before I watched the video because I like to figure shit out. I know this is about me.
Naturally.
And I stopped because I'm like, right? I'm like, this is a brand new washer. I don't need to be fucking Superman. There's a 6-minute YouTube video between here and the destination. Let's fucking get it, and it's like, okay, I got it done. I felt accomplished. And then yesterday I did a load of laundry. I felt good. Okay, one more thing off my list. Like, I rebuilt and remodeled my house. If I do when I do one more thing a day, that's 365 tasks, projects off my list. And the reason I avoid them is because they're uncomfortable. So it's like, okay, and like today I picked out a fucking rug. Okay, I'm gonna put it in. Is it gonna work or it's not gonna work? And at least I know that rug did or did not work. And by picked out a rug, I mean a new rug came in off a job here at Camel Crew Junk Removal. Shout out if you need junk removal in Milwaukee area. I'm your guy. Anyways, so when things come in off the truck for free, that's how I do my shopping. No big deal. I ain't too proud. Also, shout out to my book, because I haven't done that yet today. Words fucking matter. Retrain your brain to use language that serves you. Here I don't have this is the not for sale copy where the margins are all jacked up and like UPC or UPC covers the words. Anyways, buy the book. Buy the book because it'll reframe the way you see the world. I got a nice email actually earlier today from someone that says they didn't think I had that depth within me to write a book that had that much meaning. And I was like, man, go write that on fucking LinkedIn or Amazon, somewhere where other people can see it. Yep. Anyway, so get the book. I'm really proud of the book. And moreover, I'm proud of the fact that people that have now been reading it are taking something from it and their lives are changing because of it. And so that's my challenge to you. Buy a book. Buy a book and change your life. Dylan, what's your latest book? You got your second one coming out, right? Or is it already coming out? Or
I'm still working on the second one. My first book, Defy the Darkness, is readily available on Amazon and Audible.
Ooh. I'm not there yet.
That's just me calling you out. It's like, that's a reminder, Andy, to get it done. Do the fucking thing, Andy.
No. Thank you. So I'll explain to you about discomfort. So I was like, fuck it, I'm going to figure this out. I'll just do it myself. No big deal. Put me in a sound booth. I got this. Man.
If Dylan can do it, I can do it.
Dylan can do it. This sucks. I read the introduction in the sound booth and I struggled immensely. Oh. And then, and that's all I did. I said, hey, we're doing the introduction today. Let's get through that. And then I came in the sound booth the next time and I read like half my book and I felt good and I felt confident. And then I had the people I wrote the book with listen and they're like, yeah, this needs to be better and that needs to be better and this other thing needs to be better. And then I was at a crossroads. Do I do it the way I want to and check it off the list? Do I hire somebody else to do it and throw money at the problem? Or do I take the training, the coaching, the direction, and leadership from somebody else and do it better than I would have done it myself? And I'm doing option 3 because now that I wrote a book talking about doing things right, I have put myself in a position where doing the best thing, I pigeonhole myself, and it's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. It's like I forced myself because of running my mouth to now be a better person.
And now other people like me hold you accountable.
God, that was an unintended consequence. Yeah, I wanted to write a book and talk shit. That's what I want to do. This is how you live your life. Let me tell you something.
And now I get to talk
shit. Live it like this way. I know, right? But here's the other thing that I realized about since I put my book out. Not writing it, since I put it out. I have held myself to a higher standard from a discipline standpoint.
Yeah.
Since.
For sure.
Because I'm like, I put myself out there. And now that I've done that with some level of discipline, I'm like, I can't lie to myself about going to the gym. I got to schedule it. If it's a priority, make it a priority.
Yep.
So I stopped going to the gym for a bit. I had a surgery. They cut out my third nipple. No big deal. Non-cancerous. We're good. However, for 2 weeks, I couldn't go to the gym. So that was a legit reason to not go to the gym. Now, they never said anything about not running or jogging or, they just said no weight. So, of course, I took that as nothing at all. I played volleyball still because I love volleyball.
Of course.
No big deal.
Right.
Of course. And it hurt. I took a volleyball to the chest and it hurt because you're not supposed to take a volleyball to the chest. And it's still a little tender. Even now, if I touch it, I'm like, ooh, it's a little tendy. A little
chicken tender down there.
Oh, my God. At one point in the surgery, I go, it feels like it's a zipper. And this guy with zero fucks, he goes, it ain't a zipper. Trust me. You don't want to see what we're doing. I go, yeah, no. I went back to my YouTube video. And that mother that also he was practicing. He even said, like, once I stopped, like, he was the doctor, the other lady was the what do they call it when they're making their rounds for like 3 years? Not the intern. What's the doctor when they're an intern?
I
There's a
can't
term.
remember.
Intern doctor. Intern doctor sounds bad.
Yeah, I think we all know. We just don't have.
I'm gonna Google it. Anyways,
resident.
She.
It's resident.
Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah. See, Taylor. There we go. See, there we go. Taylor in the background. There we go. Resident. Yeah, she was gonna go to residency. Taylor coming in remote. Thank you. Shout out Taylor,
my guy.
If you need. If you need someone to run your podcast, let me tell you something about steadfastsolutionssocialmedia.com.
He's the guy.
Boy Taylor. He's the guy. One of the first books ever about podcasting that came out in 2009, he was featured in. No big deal. Some people didn't have internet back in 2009. This guy was featured in a book to talk about podcast. Who knew? There you go. There we go. Yep, there we go. I got it right. 2009. I know that because I interviewed him for a job, and then he didn't get the job. And then like 6 months later, I was like, hey, man, I want to start a podcast. He's like, dope. And now he's been hanging out with me ever since. Anyway, so
he ended up getting a job.
The resident doctor, which is not a doctor. I mean, whatever. Graduated medical school. The real doctor's like, all right, I'm out of here. I'm like, am I done? She goes like, oh, no. She's got a lot more work to do. I go, what? You stop when it stops bleeding? I go, you leave when it stops bleeding? He goes, pretty much. I go, don't answer. No, that was, don't lean into my bullshit. Anyhow, going back to what I was saying, since I've written my book, The Unintended Consequence is now that I've put myself out there, I've held myself to a higher standard.
Yeah.
And also people randomly hold me to a higher standard. Like the other day, I went to a concert. I went to Green Day and Foo Fighters back-to-back show. Not great. That's a whole other. Too many women and children to have a good time. That's all I'll say. It's hard to mosh when there's fucking 8-year-olds, dude. Anyhow, random person yelled at me at a concert. Words fucking matter, man. I go, yes, the fuck they do. So that was a highlight of the fucking PG-rated Foo Fighter show. Yeah. Whatever happened to people getting rowdy and punching each other in the face? I want to go back to that world.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the pre-COVID, people have the right to offend each other world. That's the world I want to live in.
That was like well before COVID. That was like 15 years ago.
I was still living there in my head. You know what? This is what I did deduce, right? Right. You got to be in the right venue, man. And when you go to a festival show with 50,000 people, you're not going to get, or not you. I don't give a shit about you. I'm not going to get the experience I want.
Yeah. Because
I went to Dropkick Murphys 4 or 5 months back in March in Madison at the Sylvie. Shout out Sylvie, the name of the lady, that's their grandma or whatever. Anyhow, Sylvie, Dropkick Murphys, in that show, like people were punching each other in the face in a metaphorical and actual way, right? It was rowdy, and also a couple of guys that were complete.
That's Dropkick Murphys too.
It's Dropkick Murphys, so it's a little higher, right? Also, there's only 2,500 people in the joint, so it's the right 25 people.
Right.
It's the middle of the winter, like you got to commit to it.
Yeah,
and it's indoor venue, right? You didn't stumble upon free tickets and like, oh, I guess I'm gonna check out this band. No, like you got to want to be there. And so that's what it comes down to. Because also when I went to the Hella Mega Awesome Tour 2 years ago with Green Day, Weezer, and Fall Out Boy, there was a good mosh pit. Why? Because the people that wanted to mosh were up front. Mm-hmm. And the people that didn't want to mosh were in stadium seating. This show being festival, it was like, oh, the people that had all day to stand there in their spot, stood there in their spot. I'd rather pay more money for the opportunity to get rowdy with people than have the convenience of a place to sit down. I'm not trying to sit down. I ain't going to the bathroom. I ain't doing shit. I'm getting fucking obnoxious. And I did not have that experience. And the same thing happened when I was at Jazz Fest in New Orleans. And I thought maybe just people in New Orleans were nicer to each other. Nope. Turns out festival people aren't as rowdy as what I would like to have in my life. So there's that. Who's at fault? I ain't at fault. There's no fault here. It's right venue for the right person. So we'll see. There's an opportunity for me to see Green Day in Louisville because I'm going to be at Fort Knox for 2 weeks. There's a possibility, not maybe an opportunity. And if it's a festival show, I don't know if I can do it. but it's a not like Harley Fest, Summerfest kind of festival. It's like
Yeah.
fucking like get screamed at in your face festival. Like it's strictly music fest. I'm gonna find it because of course the internet knows all things and is listening and they know, oh, you bought um, tickets to Green Day. How about here's all these other places? Louder Than Life 2023 festival in Louisville, headlined by Foo Fighters, Green Day, and Avenged Sevenfold.
It
I would,
sounds
I would,
it
right?
sounds
Like
like your
Louder
cup
Than
of tea.
Life, yeah.
Yeah.
Like that. That's like Pantera,
Yep.
Godsmack, Weezer, Rancid.
Yeah.
Like these are bands that they know how to have a good time.
Yeah.
Versus Harley Fest, bring your kids to the lakefront, enjoy the hot dog. I don't know what to say.
Won't make that mistake again. I don't know how we got on this topic. Where's the contextual connection that we got here?
Doctor's titty. Oh,
Third nipple.
I said I was at a concert. No, yeah. The third nipple. I said I went to the concert this weekend and somebody yelled at me, words fucking matter.
That's right.
That's how that was the transition.
Yeah.
That's how we got there. All right. We started somewhere and we ended somewhere else. Let's
we did. Yeah.
There we go. That's all we can say. You know what? And these episodes, what's interesting is the episodes where it's you and I get actually some of the most viewership, where it's like, hey, two guys talking about God knows what. Which is interesting.
Something like veterans, something whatever.
Well, you know what it is? Maybe it's like, hey, two people are talking in the smoking area and I'm like sitting in the corner listening and I missed that.
Yeah.
Because how often does that happen in the military, right? We started this podcast rather. We started this podcast talking about that to a certain extent. Now there's these natural, normal things, right? There's these built-in things, no different than us, right? Once a week we get on a podcast and we have a conversation. That's the built-in thing, right? And now it gives us the freedom to, once we come here and press the button, to talk about what the fuck we want to talk about.
Yeah. Because
we've put the work in. This whole idea of earned or deserved is bullshit. No, we've put the work in necessary. We own the mics, we own the cameras, we have the flexibility within our schedules where our bills are paid and our families are taken care of. And this hour a week does not negatively impact our other aspects of our life.
Yep.
And for me, it positively impacts it because, like, okay, I got to hang out with my army buddy. We got the bullshit, right? It's the things I get to do, not got to do, and that's different.
Yeah.
All right, that was my top takeaway. There it is. I actually did top takeaway first. The things like this is a proof that when you live a disciplined life to handle your business and make decisions, because as leaders we often make decisions and we get to the civilian world and then we forget how to make decisions. When you do those things, you have the freedom to build and live the life you want. That's my top takeaway from today.
I was honestly going to say the same thing. I even wrote it down, and I can give you a timestamp if you want to. If you want to,
please.
I
want references.
I don't actually know how to get the timestamp off right now.
Yep.
504. See, you talked about it. 504. I figured it out.
Wow. Here we go.
Structure creates, I think, a valuable freedom, because I think there is freedom that isn't good for you, and I think giving yourself structure, and also kind of guiding yourself into a place of discomfort and exposure to things that you wouldn't normally expose yourselves to, creates a sense of valued freedom, right? Where I have an understanding that I earned this. I gave this to myself by being who I needed to be. I get to now be who I want to be. Because it's not necessarily just an outright freedom, right? Like, just because you did all the things doesn't mean you can be whatever you want to be. There's still this guidance of, I can be who I feel like I want to be, not just this crazy version of myself that can do anything he wants. And I like that. I think that's a really important way to kind of visualize your life. If you want to develop yourself and do something valuable, you have to create the structure to get there. You have to create the systems to get there. You have to create the discipline to get there. and then remember that you have to be able to sacrifice a certain kind of freedom to get a different kind of freedom. And
Hmm.
I think that's my biggest takeaway.
What's interesting about this, going really, really put a fucking bow on it, is Harley Davidson, one of their mottos back in 2017, all for freedom, freedom for all, was their motto, right? And it was also, they used to have before that was like ride to live, live to ride. But this idea of freedom, and when you put the structure, discipline in place, you have the freedom. One thing Taylor put on the chat here talks about the value of practice and past life experience. But I talk about my 3 steps to living a successful life, which is do the fucking thing, tell the fucking world, and show the fuck up. You still have to do the fucking thing.
Yeah.
That's the challenge I see in today's society. They want to jump ahead to the tell other people and then show up. And no, you have to put in the work.
Yeah.
We have this opportunity because we put the work in ourselves through counseling. We also counsel others.
Mm-hmm.
We consult with others. And so now we can take this shared knowledge and share it with the world. Had we done this podcast 5 or 6 years ago, I wouldn't have nearly the depth of knowledge that I have now,
right,
or the experiences I went through. When we talked today, I was recalling times, 19 years in the military. I'm recalling times as a platoon sergeant, and a squad leader, and as a team leader, even as a Joe, because I put the work in. And what you can control there is the amount of work you put in.
Yeah.
So for everybody out there, freedom comes with the discipline, and discipline comes on putting the work in, practicing your craft, being the best it is at what you do. That will take you further and farther in life than connections and a resume and all these other things. We talked about this within the context of finding those ideal places, and that goes to employers also. Putting the work in to the people you hire, whether the military and non-military, when you put the work in, you will see results, whether they're going to be a great fit or not. When you choose not to put the work in, military or not, they will not be the employee that you want because you didn't put the work in. So we'll leave it at that. Put in the work. Discipline equals freedom. Another great episode here of the Welcome Home podcast where we talk about the transformation from troops and boots to veterans in the civilian world. I'm Andy. He's Dylan. We'll see you next week. Articulate next week.